Hello everyone, welcome to a new video. This time we'll be looking at the Renewed Spirit banner. Before we start, I wish to, well, say Happy New Year to everyone, because this video should be out after the New Year, since it's like 10 minutes before New Year where I live. And if this video comes out before the New Year for someone, well, Happy New Year's in advance, I guess. I don't know. Anyway, this time we'll be looking at the banner. I was a bit later than I'd like for this banner, but at the same time I kind of prefer it being today. Tomorrow I'll be working on the air banner, but also the sacred seal banner together. Typically I can't really work on a sacred seal tier list update at the same time as a, you know, new character update. A new Tempest Trial GHB tier list update, but I'll be able to actually do this for once, purely because the Tempest Trial starts like in 2 to 3 hours, I think. I might be off. I haven't really checked the announcement, but I believe it's around this time. Either way, let's talk about the banner now. As per usual, I'll go from worst to best, and surprising no one, the one character that does not have a pref is the worst unit of the banner. Shocking, I know. Alright, so Anna. I have no idea what they were thinking with this unit. I genuinely have no idea what they were thinking. Guys, it's a red bow. Would be a shame if we already had a really good red bow in the game. Oh, it's fine. Just slap like a million res and like trash in every other stats. What? Why? Just do it. It's fine. It's just Anna. Well, for a fan favorite, she has been pretty trashed. I can tell you that much. But frankly, I couldn't care less personally. But that's just me. I know a lot of people are going to give me flack for this, but I just find her so uninteresting. Charlotte is just literally a money-hungry character done right, because she has a reason to be money-hungry, which is to provide for her family. Whereas Anna over here is money-grubbing just for the sake of being money-grubbing. But anyway, for the unit itself, the bow is a Def Res Sabotage, which is like the worst combo of 2 stats possible. Sure, it means that she's always going to be helpful, giving 5 damage to whatever unit she's supporting, but see, here's the problem you run into, right? Right. What about attack? What about speed? Sure, you can use your B skill for one of the two, you can't do both. That's kind of the problem you run into. It's overall fairly iffy, and attack speed gap, which is, again, yet another support skill, is also fairly awkward, because there's no guarantee that the unit you want to buff will have the best attack and speed combo of the party, which is just making this skill all kinds of clunky. I've said this again, attack speed gap is or really gap skills in general, or just like opening skills that are harder to set up, and makes it harder for you to miss and match teams together. Like, oh, I want to have Raven on the team. Oh, well, Basilicos means that he's gonna be the one to get the buff, rather than the unit that actually requires the buff. Damn. The main problem also is the fact that it's a speed buff. Speed buff is even worse, purely because of one thing, right? The fact that the unit that wants speed the most is typically the one that has the least speed, because you don't need a unit with 60 speed to get an extra 5 speed. You need the unit that has maybe 40 speed, or 42 speed, or around that speed to get the 5 speed. But typically they won't be the one to get it, because their speed stat is abysmal. A good way to really describe this is rich get richer, and that's pretty much what it is. This unit in a nutshell is just buffs. The weapon is a minus, or buff and debuff rather. -5 at def res to people like side by side. if she has 3 more res than the enemy. Rally def res, that's extra stats. Sabotage attack, just like the weapon. Attack speed gap, that's just like the rally, except unlike the rally, you can't really target who you want. It's awkward, and, well, let's start by just comparing her as far as a red bow unit is concerned, right? Shocking no one, I'm going to use Ygren as the point of comparison. Now, Ygren is really good. Okay, this comes as no surprise. But see, here's the thing. Anna has 2 problems. One of them is the fact that she has too much res. And also too much speed. Even as a ployer or a sabotager, well, I guess if you want to use her without merges, actually the res is actually just fine. It's just that the second that you want to use her with merges, that res is going to be very wasteful. 2, the speed is extremely just overkill. Like for example, Ygren has 47 speed. Alright, the bow gives her an extra 5 speed as long as she has 1 more speed than the enemy when the speed check happens. Okay, that's really good. It gives her a few more openings and makes her a bit more consistent. So, to put it simply, Ygren is fine at 37, and even at 37 it can be considered a bit too much, but thankfully the fact that her weapon requires her to outspeed her enemies actually makes her speed in a good spot. Anna does not have a reason to have that much speed, and that's the main problem. Why would you want 40 speed, right? Honestly, especially for a support unit. A support unit, the main thing you really want on them is for them to survive. Speed helps, but once you get to a point where your speed is so unbelievably high that it doesn't actually help you that much, then what is the point? What do you gain from this? Nothing. And that's kind of the problem here. To put it simply, even if she had like 4 less speed and that was put into defense for like more survivability, just so she could like salvage her defense somewhat, she would be in a good position. But the way she is as is essentially she has less HP, she has less attack, she has less defense, she has more speed but it doesn't matter, and the one stat that she actually beats Ygren if that matters is res. But even then, if that's all you've got going for you, all you have is some utility, and that's it. Ygren will just be the better choice at just about everything. I have no idea why they decided to make her red with Ygren, especially now that Ygren got a buff. It would have been so easy to make a last-minute change and make her green, because blue has Legendary Lucina that provides insane amount of utility, as well as future vision, and red has Ygren, but green has like nothing. So it would have been a perfect spot for her to be, but they decided to make her red for some reason. Which is really ironic, because now that I think about it, Leif would also have enjoyed being red a lot more. You'll kind of see why I say this later in the video, but it's just, in general, Anna is very awkward. Which is kind of a shame, because her art is probably the best art of the banner. And she actually looks rather cute in this. But she's just not worth pulling for. So yeah. I suppose if you really just like Anna for the fact that she looks pretty, well, you're in for a treat. If you like Anna because she's a good unit in Awakening, well, you'll suddenly realize that every unit is good in Awakening. And leave it at that. Another comparison I'm going to draw with Anna, because I know a lot of people are going to be like, well, Ygren is a DPS, Anna is a support unit, what are you doing? Yeah. See, here's the thing. If all you're good for is support, okay? Your color doesn't mean shit, okay? Loot exists. Give me a reason why you would use Anna over loot. Keep in mind, Anna costs like 2.2k orbs to plus 10 on average. Or, well, more like around 2,000 or 1.9k to plus 10. Okay? Loot, on the other hand, because she's on a weekly banner, costs about 1.1k, if not less. I have someone in my Discord that managed to pull the 7 Ira they were missing for their plus 10 Ira in like 350 orbs. I've had someone else that pulled 9 copies in 400 orbs. Do you see where I'm going, where I'm getting with this? Weekly banners are busted beyond belief. So if you're at a point where you compare a Gen 1 unit, and the Gen 1 unit is genuinely better in a lot of areas than the 5-star seasonal, you don't have a reason to really pull for the seasonal, unless you like the unit, of course, which is, you know, that's all fine and good. Me saying that the unit is bad will probably not dissuade you from pulling for it. I think you get that, you get the idea. And I already know what some people will say, but Jay, she only really beats her in attack. But that's actually wrong. Dear, 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 oh dear. Weirding Tome is basically speed res sabotage, whereas Anna is def res sabotage. So already there, like I said earlier, that's a plus. It means that in any team that you use as a mage, that uses a mage in, you can use her absolutely much better than Anna, because you have a clear disposition as to what you want to do with the unit. In other words, you would use her with sabotage attack, sabotage speed, sabotage res, and there you go. You are basically covering every stat that a caster would be needing to target. Now, to add insult to injury, she also has a refine on her weapon, unlike Anna. Her weapon gives her 4 across the board the second someone has a debuff up. So not only is the support utility better, but on top of that, you have to add 4 across the board to all of her stats. Because having a debuff on an enemy is quite easy. And as you can see, the res is not even that far off either. And 40 res is more than enough. So, what about the stats in combat? Well, 63 versus 55, you have 8 more attack. 45 speed versus 45 speed. This one Anna can win if she goes for a speed refine. That's cool. 26 def versus 21 res, 5 more def. She can do shit regardless of the refine she takes. And 44 res, and Anna can kind of beat her by 1 point if you refine to res. Do you see where I'm going with this? And again, Anna's speed is overkill, so you would not want to refine the speed anyway. So, and loot is actually in a good spot in speed. In fact, she still have a bit too much, but it may sort of work on lower merges and lower dragon flower count. So there's that. But yeah, loot is better as far as being a damage dealing unit, has an easier time doing any kind of support. And just overall, I don't see anything Anna does that loot doesn't do better, except being red. And being red does not mean that much if you can't really kill anything because your attack is kind of piss poor, which is not a problem for loot, who has a 36 base attack, but also 10 dragon flowers, which means basically you're comparing 37 to a 34. But since, again, Anna does not have a pref, it's more like 34 versus 39. It is ridiculous. So yeah. Oh, and another thing, since Weirding Tome can give an extra 4 attack, it's more like 34 versus 43. Yeah. Loot actually doesn't struggle with dealing damage. That is an Anna thing. Just like the base version, I suppose. So, it comes as no surprise I'm not going to showcase any build with Anna. She already comes pre-built if you're going to use her as a support unit. If you're going to use her as a damage dealer, Egren is just completely destroying her at everything. And even as a support unit, Loot absolutely destroys her. There's just nothing positive I can say about her. Sorry. So, moving on. Selkie is up next. Now, the new Fuck Skit Fang, also known as... Wow, it feels like this is, you know, marketed by Nintendo for sure, considering new Mario Brothers and all of that. But with that said, this weapon is actually pretty good. It's just the fact that it's on a cav unit that's a problem. So, the weapon is essentially cooldown -1, with close call based off of res. This is actually a good thing. And at start of combat, blah blah blah, this is just the cavalry beast effect. Iceberg and Distant Ward. Now, Distant Ward is awkward, and to some extent even dumb. Like, yeah, it's basically a bootleg DC that gives you 5 attack and res. That's great. But here's the problem. You don't do shit against dagger, you don't do shit against bow units, so you have to completely focus on dealing with mages and healers. It's also extra stat against Dragonstone, but even that is just like a pity effect added on top of it. It's honestly, I don't know what to say. Distant Ward is not great. It works for Selkie because our def is so piss poor, but honestly, I would have just, you know, taken maybe 4 or 5 points of rest, put that into defense, taken like 4 or 5 points of speed and put that into defense, and give her distant counter. Just call it there. Like, that would have just been better overall. Although the rest would have been a bit awkward for the weapon, I suppose. The one thing you have to keep in mind, though, this is not at start of combat clause, and if it works like close call, which I would be surprised that they coded her with a different version of close call for no fucking reason, especially with like people actually telling them that they fucked up with Egren. I don't think they're going to fuck up again. I hope. But close call, the way it works is it does consider in-combat buff. Though keep in mind, if there is any check happening with at start of combat added to it, aka AoEs, in-combat buffs are ignored. So do keep that in mind, it's actually fairly important. So, alright, there's one thing that Selkie can do a bit better than Leif, and that's actually tanking AoEs. Leif has no res, most AoE busters are mages. 1+1 equals def, I think you understand. Selkie on the other hand has a good chunk of res. She can absolutely deal with Ophelia and also butcher her face off, because one of the things with Ophelia is that she typically runs life and death. That means the res check is going to be a full 10-point difference and therefore a 40% damage reduction. And her res is also pretty good, which makes this fairly easy. Her speed is also pretty solid, so you can typically double back the Ophelia that tried to kill you. So, alright, that's not bad. That said, you'll probably want to have Darting Stance to deal with, well, the fact that Ophelia probably has life and death, and you don't. It's definitely a bit awkward and a bit clunky, and that's one of the reasons why I consider her the second Wars of the Banner. As far as comparisons are concerned, if you're considering just the role of her being a DC unit, there is one comparison you can make. If you don't, there's no comparison you can make. That's just as simple as this. If you're using her as a tank, like multi-purpose tank, bleh, then she is absolutely atrocious, because Kangas exist. Kangas over here has more attack, more def, by literally 25 points, because keep in mind, Kangas' weapon is a Spectrum stance. It gives him 4 across the board when being attacked. It also provides him distant counter, which, unlike Selkie's weapon, which only works on initiation, obviously I'm talking about the Horse Beast effect, which is blocking follow-up, -4 attack and def. Kangas gets DC, and DC allows him to run many a slot. One of them would be the Anti-Armor Killer, another one would be Fortress Def Res, Another one would be a stand skill. You can do a lot with Kangas, and that's kind of the main thing with Kangas. Since he has DC in his weapon, but on top of that, a 4 across the board in his weapon. Yeah, that thing, like, Kangas is this old, and he still has a DC Spectrum stance with no HP threshold. The only thing is, he needs to not be around non-beast or dragon unit at the start of the turn. Let that sink in. Wow. Fucking wow. Yeah, it's pretty silly. But yeah, so 25 dev difference, and as far as res is concerned, he is behind by 6 points. Let's just say that between being behind by 6 points of res and being behind by 25 points of def, I'll take the former. The one thing I'll say is that Kangas is a worse AoE tanker than Selkie, and that's why I mentioned the fact that it's actually a good thing for her. If you don't want to deal with anything else than mages, dragon, and so on, then that's probably the way to go. That said, Selkie runs into another problem. Her A skill only procs against 3 type of units. One of them is dragon. That's fine. The other one is mage. Ah, yeah, that's also fine. The third one is not fine, because those are healers. You know what the A slot should have had as an extra effect? No C Disrupt. I'm not joking. If she had no C Disrupt in that A slot would have so much more purpose. But the way it is, it's just a worse DC. Or have that in the weapon instead of the Giga Excalibur effect. Which, by the way, the Giga Excalibur effect is pretty good. It actually allows her to do a bit more damage when needed, which is very welcome considering her piss poor attack. But even with that in mind, So, yeah, the fact that she can deal with any healer whatsoever because she just cannot hit them back, and no C Disrupt is impossible to give to horse unit, which is, again, yet another reason why horse units are not exactly good nowadays. Honestly, they could just make no C Disrupt available to a horse unit, and I would be absolutely fine about it. It would not be game breaking, it would actually just be fine. It would make unit like Selkie and Leif have a bit more of a reason to exist. Mostly Selkie, but because Leif has a different niche. Another thing to keep in mind is the fact that you can use her weapon to go with Gale Force. I do not recommend that, by the way. Not for her, anyway. Because the main problem that she runs into is the fact that, well, you have to run Heavy Blade with 35 attack. I get that the weapon actually makes you, when initiating, makes the enemy lose 4 attack, and that's great. But even then, like, at most you'll have 61 attack with a buff, which is still shaky. With merges you can make it work, but then you also run into another problem, which we'll cover more in depth, but the point is, a weapon gives her extra damage, true damage, and the true damage can actually screw her over, because it might make her do too much damage, despite the fact that you need to have the attack high because of Heavy Blade. What a mess. And then you have the fact that there's a 16 def unit here. Gale Force is gonna work for maybe 1 fight or 2 fights, and even there, it's shaky as all hell. That said, because of cooldown -1, it can work. But just because it can work, I don't think you should just try. But it's still worth mentioning if you don't have a good Gale Force unit, because she is colorless. Which means that she at least has consistent damage and does not have to deal with combat triangle advantage, which can actually screw over Leif. But yeah. Moving on to the build, shall we? So the set on the right is definitely just deciding to make her work as a distant counter unit. Well, bootleg distant counter unit that only deals with mages. I forgot to remove the buff on one of the image. Dumbass me, but Oh well. I think you can imagine what those stats equal to when you remove 6 points, okay? Just making sure. Oh yeah, no, that makes sense. I wasn't sure if I transformed the Selkie here. This is just a stat without transformation, so you can add an extra 2 attack, of course. So, this is mostly focusing on Brave Lucina support. I know I keep bringing her up, but that's just kind of how it is. Brave Lucina essentially would allow you to get 3 across the board, which makes you a bit bulkier. It also allows you to proc Iceberg right away because of cooldown -1, which increases your options. Because Iceberg, with Distant Ward in effect, as well as Attack Res button in effect, will push your res to basically 63, so you get 31 damage from Iceberg alone. This allows her to kill fairly consistently. Even if she doesn't get the double, it's fine, which is not really a problem anyway. Still, it's worth mentioning. Now, with that said, the main problem you will run into are healers as a result. Just be careful about that. Set on the left is just focusing on making her bulky against any encounter. That said, you lose this encounter, so be careful about that one. You still end up with 43 def and 50 res. With low attack def, that's 46-53. With attack ploy active, that would be 51-58. It makes you fairly relatively bulky, and not to mention, it also essentially still is 25 damage of Iceberg, which is good. It's just, like I said, you lose this encounter. You become bulkier in much more scenarios, but it's also a double-edged sword. Another thing you can do here is instead of Steady Stance 3, you could run Brazen Attack Def. But that is a bit shaky until you get to the Brazen Attack Def, so be careful. Keep in mind though, the fact that she's so bulky combos really well with Close Call. Because Close Call essentially just, you know, it's going to make her a bit more bulky on top of the 46 def. Which is why I even considered a set in the first place. One thing that's a bit awkward is the fact that since it's comparing to res, well, low attack def will not really matter for that. Because it's the res that's taken in consideration. You can't really run something like low attack res and be like, oh yeah, it's good, I need it for the weapon. Even if it was a thing, which it's not, but you know, you get the idea. Overall, a okay unit. I don't really recommend pulling for her though. And now we start getting to the, I don't want to say all decent because that sounds condescending, but we start getting to the units that are a bit better, you know. Leif. Now, Leif actually has enough attack, even on low merges, to function as a Gale Force unit, which I've already mentioned. And the fact that she works as a Gale Force unit makes the effect of -4 attack and def on foe during combat when you initiate actually matter. I find it a bit odd that they decided to give her low speed def or glimmer, because if anything, there's one thing that they should have realized with Leif the first time she was released, and it's the fact that everyone uses her with Gale Force, because she's consistent at doubling her enemy, and her attack is still okay-ish, purely because of the weapon's horse beast effect. But no, instead they decided, oh yeah, 41 speed, let's slap an extra 6 speed in the A slot, and then an extra 3 speed in the B slot. I'm sure that's going to be so required. I'm being sarcastic, if you can't tell. Now, there is one reason you don't want to use her as an AoE. In fact, no, there's two. Okay? The main reason is that her res is garbage. The other reason is the fact that it's reliant on speed, the close call effect. Since it's reliant on close call, since it's reliant on speed, the main problem is if you have to deal with any AoE buster, okay, you'll typically run into this problem, which is the fact that AoE busters run Life and Death. Because they are running Life and Death, that makes catching up to their speed a bit of a problem. Even if you have 41 speed, if you have to deal with Life and Death 4 while you have this encounter, I'm sorry, Ophelia ends up at 40 speed even without Speed Plus. And you are at 41. That kind of reduces the gap a lot. And therefore, you don't really soak anything from the weapon. So even if you had good res, the fact that it's reliant on speed makes it unwieldy at best. Still works as a tank somewhat, obviously. Like, you can use the unit as something else than an AoE tank, right? But it's ideal if you can also deal with AoE tanks. That's just kind of the problem. If you can't deal with that, well, there's better options out there. I'll just say that. Now, that is not the reason you would want to use her. The reason you would want to use her is a Gale Force unit. That said, she does have a bit of competition as far as that is concerned. Yarn over here is not that far off. In fact, you can make the case that in some cases he's actually better. The main reason is purely because of his weapon. Leif is reliant on Heavy Blade. Yarn does not need any seal. That's the biggest draw that he has. Because the way he works is essentially attacks get hit, hopefully gets pushed under 75%, then hit back. And in his case, his speed is not overkill, so attack speed solo actually helps him. Honestly, Yarn was really ahead of his time because 33 speed is like the sweet spot for a unit with a pref, 9 times out of 10. I believe he also has speed plus 3 on his weapon, sadly, but oh well. If he had cooldown -1, I would say he's just better at the role, but because he does not have cooldown -1, that means he always has to take a hit. Mystic Boost is out of the question because of the weapon, so you have to make him tanky against everything. This is awkward. And Speed Res Solo is not exactly a skill yet either, which is also unfortunate. So, yeah. The main thing with Yarn is that even if you don't have Heavy Blade, you can actually make him work. If you have Heavy Blade on someone else. If you don't have Heavy Blade on Leif, then Leif loses a lot of power, because she uses Gale Force effectively. And the second you go outside of Gale Force, her options become a lot more limited. In fact, as far as option goes, I would just not use her. There's just so many cases where you could just use a better unit. And the other problem is the fact that she's green. I know I've mentioned this before, but let's put it this way. The fact that she's green means that she's going to be constantly compared to the beast green units. You have Raisin. You have Kaden. There we go. These two are insanely good. And will typically take your green spot while also being able to hold their own in combat somewhat. As a result, Leif is a bit of, well, she's in a strange spot. Thankfully, she's a damage dealer, because damage dealer, there's really only Yarn and Bunny Alphonse that can compare to her, and they both are worse. But as far as Gale Force is concerned, it is shaky. It definitely is shaky. And Kaden can be used as a Gale Force unit anyway. You don't need a million points of stats. The fact that Kaden has extra utility over her is what makes Kaden overall better. If she had been red, at least she could have been used in like Beast Cav team comps. And if she had been blue, she would actually be in a much better spot. If she was blue, she would basically not have any competition, essentially. As a green, she is just in a weird position. That said, even if she went blue, she would have competition from the regular lens cav, like Sirius, which makes it a bit iffy overall, but still, not bad. That said, while I did say that Yarn is better because, you know, does not rely on Heavy Blade, The thing is, Leif is just so much better than Yarn if Heavy Blade is concerned. It's not even funny. Now, let's talk about this. Since you're not reliant on this encounter, your A slot's open, and at the same time you do not want a sturdy blow skill or anything that increases your attack, that is a problem, because you'll end up having too much attack. Right here, even with Fortress Def Res, you're at 66 attack when you're doing the check, as long as you're transformed, of course. Which, yeah. At that point, you're very consistent with Heavy Blade. But see, that's another problem you run into. 66 attack with an extra 7 damage because of the weapon? You run into the Rid territory, as I like to call it, where you tend to also one-shot the target you're dealing with, making Gale Force unwieldy at best. This is problematic, to say the least. There's just not much you can do about it, but yeah. Mystic Boost is also ideal here, because if you're going to deal with a low skill, it would be like Attack Def, you do too much damage. Attack Speed, the speed is worthless. Speed Def, both stats are pointless. So, like, you're in a very weird situation, so Mystic Boost is just a better situation overall. That said, her speed is so good that it makes her very bulky. And the reason why you want Fortress Def Res is because you'll be at a point with 43 Def and 34 Res. But because of the weapon, it pushes your bulk to 47-38. So at that point, taking like 20 damage is about what you'll see at most of the time. But then the Guardian Fang kicks in and pushes the damage down from 20 to 12. Which makes it very easy for her to heal herself up and consistently keep her HP up with Mystic Boost. Even if we had just like low attack def or low attack speed or whatever, okay? You have to realize, because of the damage reduction on the weapon, it doesn't matter as much, right? And because you have so much speed, getting doubled is not happening, right? So you're in this weird position, unless you're dealing with something like Legendary Hector, but these are like very specific matchups. But anyway, so you're in this kind of situation where at most, low attack is going to get rid of maybe 3 attack, unless the enemy is buffed, in which case it's going to be like up to 9 attack. But because of Guardian Fang, that damage you're taking is not 3 to 9. No, 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 no. You lose 40% of this. So in other words, it's more like 1 damage to... well, actually, more like 2 damage, I think. Yeah, 2 damage to like 6. Wow, 6 damage at most, huh? And how much do you heal with Mystic Boost? 6? Oh. So in other words, Mystic Boost actually makes you either, like, makes up for the deficit, or it heals you for more than the deficit. That's kind of the reason why you want Mystic Boost over it. This makes you fairly bulky, and it makes Gale Force very consistent. The problem is, again, the damage. Still, overall, fairly good unit. And now moving on to one unit that is actually, like, really, really, really good. Let's talk about Alphonse, shall we? Well, Alphonse is one of the most busted weapons we've had in a long time that's actually balanced. You know, not Altina. That said, the fact that it comes also with Open the Future is really insane. I think you've already known how I feel about Oath's skills also. Oath skills are just, you need to be with your team, but you also need your team not to have tactics, because otherwise the Oath skill feels completely pointless. Yeah, they're pretty irrelevant, no matter how you look at it. Especially since it's adjacent, and not like within 2 space. Like, tactics have just more range. Why would you put a skill that has less range than tactic? It's like a perfect way to get panicked as well. Like, I have no idea what is the point of that skill. Anyway, close counter, special spiral. Hey, another close counter that is Luck the Seasonal. Still don't have a close counter in the pool anymore, since Takumi was the only one left and he was Thanos snapped. Great. Would be nice to get a close counter unit. Just one. Just like the one. That'd be great. Imbued Coma is a cooldown -1 weapon, which, just like Saber, whenever the special is ready at the start of combat. This is important because it actually kicks him out of the chance of using an AoE. If you use an AoE at start of combat, you'll have the full charge, essentially. So you will not get the 5 across the board in combat, and the 5 across the board will not be added to the AoE, making the weapons 5 across the board useless on anything but enemy phase. Don't worry, I was thinking of doing that as well, and it's not good. It's not a good idea. And it blocks follow-ups. Now this is really important for later builds, but you'll kind of see where I get to in a bit when it comes down to it. Overall, it's a really strong kit, and honestly, you could just use base kit and be just fine. Now, let's talk about more in-depth sets. Let's not focus on the one to the right for now. Let's focus on the one to the left. This is basically base kit, like I said. Attack Smoke to replace the garbage C skill. Swap to actually make him, you know, protect someone while having someone near you for the 5 attack and res. You have to realize just how busted Imbued Coma is. Basically, whenever his special is ready, which is really easy due to the duo skill, which I will try to actually talk about this time. I keep forgetting talking about duo hero skill. I hate my life. But, right. You end up with 76 attack. With this set, you also end up with 50 def and res. Because keep in mind, if your spec is ready, you get 5 across the board. So, Open the Future does 25 damage. Special Spiral keeps it always proc, so you always get the 5 across the board. That is insane. But then to add insult to injury, you also heal yourself. So for example, let's say someone with 60 attack that's blue attacks you. That does 10 damage. Let's now say they have 50 def. So you do 26 damage plus 25 from the Open the Future. You do 51 damage. Typically you'll have one-shotted it, you know, through the 50 defense. And on top of that, and that's with no support by the way, that's just like the 6 across the board of a buff, someone next to him, and Open the Future ready. That's it. So that's already busted enough as is. You can basically get all of this support on one unit, Legendary Azura, and call it a day. It's busted. But you basically one-shot them, like say they have 50 health, you basically are healing yourself back for 12. So you heal yourself back to full as a result. Like, this is insane. You can basically just face tank entire maps with this and be completely fine. It's basically very similar to Sirius, but unlike Sirius, it does more damage. It's very simple, really. Sirius would do, say, we have 60 speed, you'll get maybe 18 damage. Here, if you have 60 def, you'll get 30. A bit of a difference, isn't it? As for the set on the right, it's for people who want to do something a bit different. And essentially, this is with a speed set. Keep in mind, Imbued Coma gives 5 across the board. So with Swift Sparrow 2, which is not a seal yet, but it's basically going to be a seal the second Tempest Trial drops, you're basically at 47 speed. The magic number, right? So you'll basically be sitting at 78 attack and 47 speed. And your bulk is not even bad. Like, you're at 45 def and 40 res. Even then. So Open the Future still does 22 damage. That's kind of just ridiculous, but it's something you can do if you want him to be more player phase oriented. And now, if you want a combo of both things, unless you have to deal with range units, I believe. Though I have to say something about this. Right here, with attack speed bond 4, you cannot be debuffed in attack or speed. So you're basically sitting at 43. And with the weapon active, that's basically 5 plus 7 plus 5. So you're at 48 speed. 48 speed is not bad already. 74 attack, hell yeah. And on top of that, you have 50 def and res. This makes it very difficult for anyone to really touch you. At that point, you just will double them. Your weapon denies follow-up, so even if they have something like Bolt Fighter, it won't matter. And if they don't have something like Bolt Fighter, well, you're doubling them anyway, because you blocked their follow-up. They basically would need to have good speed and no follow-up to deal with this. And since most of the people with no follow-up are red, well, I think you can see where I'm going with this. You'll typically one-shot them anyway from the special. Like, oh no, Marita, oh, the humanity, and you just one-shot her anyway, so who cares? That's kind of what it is. Alphonse is a very good unit. That said, there is one thing to note when it comes down to Alphonse. If you want to run this close counter, it is possible. You will have to support him, however. That said, Marth is a really good combo to him. After all, you can't use Legendary Lucina on mages. Marth, one adjacent to him, if Marth has a support with Alphonse, his weapon plus the support will push the 4 across the board while also supporting the rest of your team. You could also use Corin, of course, but Marth is a better option because he's also going to be supporting the rest of your team, not just Alphonse, you know? So that's already 4 across the board, but then on top of that, let's just say you run Drive Speed and Drive Attack. You're basically giving 7 attack and 7 speed. Oh look, what does Attack Speed Bond 4 does? Oh, except that Marv gives 7 attack, 7 speed, 4 def, and 4 res. So, yeah, that's really good. Corin would do the same, but with an extra 2 across the board on top of it. So there is that to mention. Still, like I said, Marv supports the rest of your team as well. So, to put it simply, you would be in this position where you would be able to still hit the same amount of speed, you know, at 48 speed. But, even with that, you'll be able to just proc open the future and have enough speed, but also have this encounter. Which means that you're basically just comboing this set with the first set. In other words, because you'll have enough speed to block follow-ups, you'll have enough speed to double them, you have enough speed to just protect yourself in general. And you'll have enough attack to do just one-shots if needed. Which is fantastic, because it just gives Alphonse more options. This is honestly the best way I would go about it, but again, this is the reason why I didn't want to really show a build with this encounter. I'd rather really explain the idea with Marth as an ally support. And keep in mind, most of these sets are requiring high merges. If you're investing in the unit, keep in mind, it is an investment. Seasonal are very expensive. That said, I do think that, unlike the rest of the banner, this unit is actually pretty solid enough for it. So yeah. Overall, this is an insane unit, and you can actually work around his weaknesses to make him stronger. Something that I wish Altina would take a page or two about. But yeah. So, in conclusion, this banner is very hit or miss. Alphonse and Sharina are really strong, but Anna, Selkie is niche as all hell, and Leif is a decent Gale Force unit that may also screw herself over because of her weapon. So, yeah. Overall, I'd say this banner is okay. If you're going to be summoning for it, I would strongly just say, go blue. Don't bother with other colors. If you don't have a blue but you have somehow a green, go green, I suppose. And That's about it. Personally, I'll probably go blue, and when there's no blue, I'll go red, because I kind of want to have infantry dragon flowers for a team comp I want to showcase. Probably at the end of the month. We'll see on that one, though. And, well, with that said, I believe I have covered everything I had to say concerning this. Please do let me know if the audio's okay, or if it's different than usual. This is a different version of OBS. To give you guys an idea, I was using OBS version 0.659. I did not realize how aged my that was, because I then decided to upgrade to my OBS, and it went to version 24.0.3. Yeah. I was basically using an alpha version of OBS. I have no idea why I had such an old version. Though I do prefer the older version, it was a lot easier to navigate, and there is just so much new things on this that it makes it a bit overwhelming. Still, at the end of the day, as long as it gets the job done, that's really all I care about. So please tell me if it looks fine, you know, if it sounds fine. With that said, I'll be seeing you later or in the comments. Have a nice rest of the day, everyone. See ya.